And, Mr. Chairman, you just told us that you are expecting Jim Comey to withdraw his motion not to appear and, in fact, to appear in front of your committee later this week.
That's correct. That's where the discussions are headed. I think that will be made official with the court soon. If for any reason it doesn't happen, then the parties will be back in court tomorrow morning. And as I indicated earlier, I think that the legal precedents are very, very powerful. This no district judge has ever quashed a subpoena issued by the House Representatives, and the Supreme Court has been very clear on the sanctity of those subpoenas.
Jim Comey's talked a lot about going public versus private. Explain the difference, because I know that if you're in a private setting, he can just say, oh, that question is confidential and classified, I can't answer it. So can you get more answers in a private setting versus a public setting?
Yes, because the format is one where our counsel will ask questions for an hour. The Democrats will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour, then back to the Republicans, and back and forth until all the questions have been asked that need to be asked. Whereas in a public hearing, if people have watched those, they know that each member gets 5 minutes. You can't even ask more than 2 or 3 questions, and certainly can't ask any follow-up questions in that fashion. So someone like Trey Gowdy or John Ratcliffe, who are experienced prosecutors, and others who are experienced investigators, can't pursue the long lines of questions that need to take place. That's why this needs to be done in that setting. However, we share Mr. Comey's interest in transparency. We expect all of these interviews that we have transcribed thus far to be made public, but we have committed to making his public very quickly after the interview takes place. So the public
when you interview him this week, I mean, that's sort of the final thing. I mean, the American people want accountability here, Mr. Chairman. Do you think this investigation goes away in the House once you step down?
Well, that's a very good question, because if I were a Democrat, I'd be concerned about some of the actions taken by Mr. Comey and others in the FBI leading right up to the election, announcing a reopening of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email, and then announcing again immediately after that it was being shut down. I mean, there are a lot of things that we've learned in the background of that are going to come out as a part of this that I think should be of interest to every American, and every American should not want the FBI being weaponized, as some have claimed, by the Democratic Party when they, created the situation in which a dossier was then used by the FBI to get a warrant from the FISA court. These are all things that should concern every American in terms of protecting their civil liberties and making sure that their elections are free and fair, and we don't want to see the FBI handling investigations like they were in the future.
Well, look, I mean, it's a shame that it has come to this, where you only have a few weeks left, and now you're seemingly going to speak to him, because we know that there was FISA abuse, and we know that there was leaking against the law. So we'll be watching that. I am really interested in seeing whether or not he is going to keep that promise and speak to you later this week. We'll be watching. Let's talk a bit about what work you've got to get done before you step down. And, of course, you've got an upcoming deadline, and there's potential for a government shutdown. Do you expect you will have the money to fund the wall and the government will stay open past December 7th?
Well, I think the issue with regard to funding the wall is a matter of how many dollars are going to be agreed upon. In my opinion, that's important, but unfortunately what will probably not be a part of any final deal here is what the president and what the administration really needs, and that is closing of a multitude of loopholes that deal with issues like asylum fraud, that deal with issues like so-called catch and release, where people are given a hearing date, released in the interior of the country, and never show back up for their hearing. The president and the Department of Homeland Security are being very valiant, the Border Patrol, in stopping these attempted invasions at our port of entry there in San Ysidro, California. But that's not the right way to handle this. We need an agreement with Mexico, and we need our laws changed so that people who are not supposed to be in the United States can be returned home expeditiously.
Are you expecting a better rapport or agreements with the new president of Mexico and President Trump?
I don't know, but I know that there are serious discussions going on with that new administration. So I guess we can all be hopeful. This is not in Mexico's interest to have the situation down there as it is right now. Right. And it's never in the interest of a country to be the transit for people coming across it, many of whom are known to be convicted criminals. Some are suspected terrorists. This is not a situation that's any better for Mexico than it is for the United States. So they ought to work together to work it out.
So are you expecting a government shutdown?
I hope not. I'm certainly going to be staying here till the end of my term to make sure that that doesn't happen. But it's also important that the parties all come to the table and be reasonable about those negotiations.
And then you've got an upcoming hearing with technology CEOs. You've got Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, testifying in front of your committee. Tell me about this and what you want to get from him. There's speculation that these technology companies, who are now more powerful than they've ever been before, are censoring conservative conversation. Is that your main issue?
That is one of a number of issues. There are also antitrust issues. There are also issues related to how Google and the other social media companies raise their revenues based upon what they put in front of the viewer. There are also privacy issues. We have a number of issues to discuss with Mr. Pichai, who was scheduled to come in on Wednesday. I expect that because of President Bush's state funeral on Wednesday that we'll have to put that off until next week. But we're expecting that to occur, and it's very, very important that it do occur.
So you'll put Sundar Pichai off till next week. What about Jim Comey? Does that get impacted from the H.W. Bush proceedings?
We expect that there will be days later in the week that we'll be able to do that. That doesn't require the entire Congress to be in session like a public hearing does. That we're still working on the details of that, but we expect that to occur later this week.
All right. We so appreciate your time.
Not during the funeral, but later.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for your time this morning and, of course, your great service to our great country. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
Former FBI Director James Comey now challenging a subpoena from Republicans in the House. He accuses them of partisan harassment for demanding a closed-door testimony in the FBI actions leading up to the election in 2016. The House Judiciary Committee Chair is Bob Goodlatte, the Republican from Virginia. Sir, how are you? And welcome back here on America's Newsroom. So you got your work cut out for you. James Comey says he's worried about leaks. Should he be worried?
Well, first of all, we don't condone leaks. Trey Gowdy and I concerned about that, and since Jim Comey claims he wants transparency, we've already indicated that we will release the transcript of this under oath private interview the next day after it takes place. We're almost done with this investigation. He's one of the last witnesses. 16 other people have testified under oath in the same setting that we're asking him to do it. And his claim that he needs to do it in public is, in my opinion, a farce. Quite frankly, 5 minutes is not enough time for an experienced former prosecutor like Trey Gowdy or John Ratcliffe to follow all of the threads that need to be followed, the hundreds of questions that need to be asked. And that needs to be done in a private setting.
Okay.
But we're happy for the transparency.
If there are hundreds of questions, give me one that's on your mind. What do you need to know, sir?
Well, we need to know, just as one example, what Jim Comey was doing during the time between when he wrote a statement that exonerated Hillary Clinton and when he actually issued it in revised form a number of weeks later. We need to know what Jim Comey was doing with regard to the initiation of the so-called Trump-Russia collusion investigation, and we need to know why he persisted in pursuing surveillance of Carter Page, United States citizen, for a full year when there's no evidence that Carter Page did anything that would suggest that
you don't
he was colluding with the Russians.
You don't think you can get those answers in an open hearing?
No, because you get an answer and then you have 3 or 4 follow-up questions. The interviews generally have ranged 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. We rotate 1 hour for Republican counsel and then 1 hour for the Democrats to ask their questions. And when we're done with this investigation, which is obviously going to be soon, we'll release all of these transcripts so the American people can see what was going on in 2016 and leading into 2017.
Trey Gowdy suggested you could videotape it. Is that some sort of compromise it could be?
We're open to the idea of videotaping it. The fact of the matter is, though, he is trying to run the clock on us, and that's why we think he's filed this motion to quash. They also, Fusion GPS also tried that. They were knocked down, and instead he came in, Glenn Simpson came in and took the fifth. What Jim Comey's intentions are, I don't know, other than that it's pretty clear he doesn't want to come in and answer the detailed questions that we have.
I'm looking at the calendar. I know you are as well. You're almost out of time, right? I mean, first week of January, the gavel switches.
We have another month. Now, of course, when that happens, we already have indications from Lindsey Graham, who's expected to be the new chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Ron Johnson, who is the chairman of the Senate Oversight Committee, that they intend to pursue this. And we also know that the Inspector General, who's already filed a 400-page report, so if you're looking for questions for Mr. Comey, you need look no further than a 400-page report from the Inspector General regarding matters. And that, coupled with the documents we've examined and the witnesses we've talked to, have given us a plethora of questions that he needs to come in and answer so we can complete this investigation.
Let me slide in a few more things here in the minute I have left. Comey's statement from his attorneys reads like this: Mr. Comey should not be coerced into participating in an improper and partisan effort to undermine the legitimacy of an institution that he served for the better part of 4 years. There is no legitimate reason why Mr. Comey cannot provide sworn live public testimony about the matters under investigation. You took to Twitter last night on that. Here's what you said: the truth is best served with transparency. What is Director Comey trying to hide from the American people with this baseless motion to quash? So you got this battle with James Comey. What happens with Rod Rosenstein? Will you get a satisfactory answer from him over the next month about the reports that he was willing to wear a wire, and find out whether that was true or not?
I think it's very important that Mr. Rosenstein answer questions with regard to that. I know he's put out a statement denying it, and we have a New York Times report with regard to it, but I think the public deserves to have more information about that. And there are a few other things that Mr. Rosenstein could testify about.
Well, you got a lot moving on both fronts, though. How much can you get done, sir?
We're close to the end. These are the last witnesses that we need to do. We've examined, hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, searched through them, and have thousands of documents that are relevant to our investigation and all of these witnesses. We're ready to turn that over to the Senate, and we're anxious to see what additional work the Inspector General does. Mr. Gowdy and I have, of course, also called for the appointment of a second special counsel, especially when you have Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS coming in and taking the Fifth Amendment, and others who are reluctant to testify.
Yeah, you sound confident that you'll get your answers. We'll see if that's the case. Sir, thank you for coming back here. Bob Goodlatte from Virginia. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.